Hello, I'm Helen Allett from LSTM. In this lecture, we're going to think about how we use reflection to enhance mentorship. So our learning outcomes are to define what we mean by reflection in the context of mentorship, to discuss how reflection can be useful as a mentorship tool, and then to describe and apply the Gibb's reflective cycle. First of all, what is reflection? Well, there's many possible definitions, but basically it's thinking about something, asking ourselves questions about something that's happened or something that we've witnessed, maybe discussing with other people and trying to work something out, trying to make sense of something that's occurred so that we can learn from that experience and then help us to plan better for the future. So we need to understand that it is important to reflect on our experiences and to think about what learning comes from that reflection, and to consider whether that only applies to negative experiences or also to positive experiences. Certainly, I would feel that it should apply to both. So, what are our sources of reflection? What do we reflect about? Well, we can reflect about things that happen every day, things that are routine, and we can consider those routines. We can think about positive experiences, so thinking about things that went really well and considering what it was about them that made them so positive, as well as thinking about less positive experiences and thinking about what it was that maybe could have been done differently. Negative experiences and eventful incidents. So eventful incidents are perhaps things that happen outside the range of norm or unusual incidents, as well as our routine activities. And we reflect on important events. We do this in our real life. We can reflect upon important life events. Perhaps you might reflect about your wedding day, for example. And we reflect about things that have particular meaning to us. So many different sources of events for us to reflect about. And really, clinical practice is no different. We should, just as people, we reflect about events in our lives, then we will reflect on things that happened in our clinical practice. So why should we do that in particular? So it helps us to think about and plan actions. Once we've analysed situations and developed an understanding perhaps of why things happened, then we can move forward and plan actions to make things better for the future. We can evaluate the effectiveness of the care that we and other providers give to patients, and we can share good practice, so things that go well we can share, and maybe other people can improve their practice as a result. It helps us to make sense of experiences that can at the time seem quite perplexing and that we may not understand why something happened. Reflection may aid in our understanding and making sense of that experience. And also we can think about perhaps the more difficult aspect of challenging poor practice as a result of our reflections, if we've identified areas of poor practice. And this should end up improving patient care. So all this reflection in all these ways should be with the aim, the goal, if you will, of improving the care that we give to our patients. So what's the role of reflection in mentorship? Why do we think about it as part of mentorship? It's because it helps us to review an encounter and consider what went well and what could be better. So it becomes a growing experience. We can also consider the likely effect of the encounter and what it might have had, the effect it might have had on the mentee. That's also a very important aspect, because sometimes when you've had a bad experience or a scary experience, it colours your future behaviour. So it's important to understand that and then to be able to take steps to follow up and to support those mentees. Reflection will help us to improve our mentoring skills, and we can role model reflection to our mentees as we reflect ourselves. So to do reflection, then we need certain skills, and those skills include self-awareness, the ability to describe a situation or a happening, the ability to critically analyze a situation, and then skills of synthesis and analysis. So we'll go through each of these in turn now. So what skills do we need for reflection? Well, self-awareness, and that enables you to analyze your own reactions and feelings and to examine how a situation has affected you and how you might have affected that situation. So being aware of yourself and your own feelings about a situation. Description is much more factual. It's recognizing and recalling accurately the significant events in that occurrence and the key features. So it's really a factual description of what happened and when. And then critical analysis, that's examining the components of a particular situation, perhaps identifying what we know and then challenging assumptions that might have been made and thinking about imagining and exploring alternatives. So looking critically backwards and then exploring a little bit forwards. So, and that is synthesis, is joining new knowledge with previous knowledge to solve problems creatively and to predict likely consequences of actions. And evaluation is taking stock of the consequences of an action. So all this is part of reflection. And we can reflect as things happen, or we can reflect about them afterwards, or both. So you might call reflection in action is the ability to think about what we're doing while we're doing it and to sort of analyze as we go along and very quickly then develop our next step. Whereas reflection about action or on action is thinking about the event afterwards and maybe documentation as well. So the two aspects of reflection, and you can do both. To be an effective and reflective practitioner, we need to have certain key characteristics. We need to be willing to learn from our experiences and from that learning bring about change. We need to be able to make time for reflection. So that means regarding it as an important thing to do and something that is of value and of enough value to make time for. We need to be open and honest in our reflections and willing to share and discuss our experiences. And we have to have motivation to go through those experiences and analyze them and make a consequent action plan. So we might want to sort of sweep an unpleasant experience or a sad experience under the carpet and not want to face up to thinking about it. But if we don't do that, then we won't learn, we won't grow, and then there's a risk that the same thing could happen again. Equally, when things have gone well, it's always good to think about analysing the experience and think about why it went well so that we could replicate those behaviours in the future. So this is just a tool that is useful for self-reflection. It's called the Gibb's reflective cycle. And it starts with description. So the description is a factual account of an incident. What happened? When did it happen? Who was involved? How did it happen? So these are all facts. So it's the description. And then having described it, we want to then think about what we were feeling about it, what we were thinking as it happened and subsequently. So thoughts and feelings. So what you thought and felt about that experience when it was happening, and also how you feel on it now, on looking back and recollecting it. Feelings are important because they can drive our behaviours. So we need to understand our feelings. So, for example, if you had a very bad experience, maybe delivering a baby, a breech baby perhaps, that went wrong, maybe the baby got stuck, and you have very bad recollections about that experience, you may not want to deliver another breech baby. So it's important to recognise those feelings so that steps could be taken, so that perhaps in the future, if you were put in that situation, you could handle it, and you could handle it safely. So evaluation. So having understood our feelings, then we need to evaluate what was good or bad about the experience. And it's very often the case that experiences have mixed aspects, and they're not entirely bad or they're not entirely good. So it's good to break down the experience into the good parts and the parts where we need to make some improvement. I've often found when I've been counselling women after a traumatic birth experience, and I ask them this question, and they say, I say, tell me what it was like for you, and they say things like, well, it was a total nightmare. And then I say, well, was it all like that, or were there some good bits, and as well as the bad bits? And we focus on both, and we think about celebrating the good as well as wanting to think how the bad bits could have been maybe different, and how they might be different in the future for themselves or for other people. So it's very good to break things down and to not just view the experience as a whole, because you will find that there are both good and bad in virtually all experiences. So having done that, then we're going to move on to analysis and think about the sense that we can make out of that situation. So to do that, we might need to think what other... And having done all that, we will then want to come to a conclusion. And in that conclusion, we need to think about, well, what else could we have done? And consider the situation in the light of the new insights that you've gained from the reflection and the new interpretations of the actions that have come from the evaluation and the analysis. So with the benefit of hindsight, what else could you have done? What could you have done differently? And it's always very important to think that we are bearing this in mind with the benefit of hindsight. So we're not judging ourselves back in that situation, but now that we've thought more about it and learnt more, then we can look back and think, now, if I was in that situation again, what could I do next time? And then finally, we will come up with an action plan as a result of this reflection. And this is absolutely key, because it's the point really of doing the reflection is to think about the future and how to make things better in future, or how to replicate good practice in future in different circumstances. So you might want to think about how the outcome could be made different the next time this particular situation arises. What would you do the next time? And what do you need to do now to ensure that it will be different next time? So perhaps going back to our difficult breech birth, perhaps our mentee needs to spend some time with you, the mentor, in the skills room, using a mannequin to practice vaginal breech delivery and the techniques involved until they're sure about the techniques. Perhaps they need to watch the training videos again, and other learning tools could be employed so that the next time they are faced with that situation, they actually have a sure foundation of knowledge and understanding of what to do, so that they can ensure a different outcome. And that might go a long way towards dispelling those feelings of fear and dread and replacing them with a sense of confidence and positive expectation. So I don't know quite how we'll do this, not just now because you're listening to this before the training, but during the training we're going to perhaps divide ourselves into small groups and have a few minutes to think back of some incidences that have happened to us, that anybody might want to share, or if not, we'll provide you with some theoretical incidents. And you could perhaps use this reflective model to reflect on the incidents and go through the various subheadings of the reflective cycle. And then we can share together what we've thought. And it's a very useful exercise to do, and hopefully it will result in helping us to think about how we can change practices. So in summary, in this talk we've considered about what reflection is in relation to mentorship, both for the mentor and for the mentee. And we can reflect on our mentorship encounters, and we should reflect on them just as much as the mentee should reflect on their clinical encounters. And we need to understand and be aware of the key skills that we need for effective reflective practice. And we can think about how we use this Gibb's reflective cycle and how useful it might be in our mentoring process. Thank you very much for listening.